All of us have always been very comfortable with the retail KYC. We've seen how UIDA changed everything when in 2010 first Aadhaar was given out in Maharashtra. It changed the way we all looked at our identities, starting from an individual to all the citizens of this country across strata. People could use it for payments. Someone could use it for collecting DBT. Somebody like us could use it for probably even today getting it in Digiyatra, other identifications. So across the spectrum, retail KYC has done its job. But if you look at the parallel for it, what have businesses got today? Earlier we used to have Business Pan, we've got Udyam which has come out. However, the standardization, the way UIDA Aadhaar has been able to do, that still seems to be missing somewhere for all the businesses. There are a lot of conversations around why KYC is to be done. There's a lot of conversation and challenges around UBO. Once a centralized repository comes in place or a solution comes in place, the cost of every KYC should be brought down, because once done and the onus is taken up by the issuing entity, then the cost entirely across the board should be coming down. However, there is again a contrary thought process as well to say that a cost invested by one entity shall be borne across. So perhaps that is also one of the factors which businesses and specifically the repository agencies who are working into this have been contemplating with. At least let's start somewhere. And then let the regulator give a lot of push, let the industry also come together, let the collaboration happen amongst entities to be able to take this forward. And it looks like that this is the need of the hour to take it for businesses, for an entity to come in between, perhaps a consortium of entities to come in between and take the mantle forward for all of us and make businesses' life easy.
While let's say RBI has issued guidelines which seem to be, let's say, very standardized kind of a thing, but banks actually interpret it differently. Okay, different banks interpreted it differently, and within banks also, let me tell you, different people interpret it differently. They resolve it differently. They execute it differently. So it becomes an extremely, I mean, big pain point for the clients who are on the business side. RBI has to come out with some solution, okay, as to what to do with this thing. Maybe some possible solution, of course, could be, let's say, they create something like, let's say, Aadhaar for the companies, I mean, for the business entity itself. Say, like we already have bureaus who are, let's say, collecting information about the let's say track record of the borrowers. We have rating agencies again who are regulated. So why not having, it is a very critical area. I mean, it is no less critical area. So maybe we can have a regulated agency doing it, multiple regulated entities doing this thing. Absolutely. Under strict regulations, yes.
Simple pieces which need to be done is can we define the data structures in terms of these are the documents, like for individual there are 6 or 7 documents which can be accepted, then banks can decide which document under which circumstances to be taken, etc. So that's one piece. Similarly, there is no standardization there for businesses. Second important piece is the documents which are there for businesses. There's no digitization of those documents and not available to the institutions on a consent basis, so that the entire digital journeys can happen. And the third complexity which arises is that there's always an authorized signatory on behalf of the entity, and we really don't have a repository of sort which connects who's authorized to sign on behalf of this entity in a digital form. As a result, either all the partners have to sign, or you need a BR every time account modification has to be done and an account opening has to be done, whether on the liability side or on the asset side of the business. And each of these, even the format of the BR is not standardized, etc. Do we get all partnerships to get registered? So look at simply in the Maharashtra piece, where if you have to register your rent agreement today, everything happens digitized. There's a standard rent agreement which comes in with maybe a couple of clauses which you can change. So can we have a simple mechanism like that, where all the partnerships get registered there? So if with that done, that will take care of your legal entity proofs, etc. And then once you have this data, all your other certifications, right? Whether it's professional tax, whether it is shops and establishment tax, everything should feed on from this data itself. Then it becomes far more universal. Account aggregator ecosystem. There's a particular bank who has invested in, or for the CKYC example, there's a particular bank who has onboarded the customer. They have spent 1,000 rupees, etc. Now the all other banks in the ecosystem who are dipping into this are getting it at 100 rupees in my example. Now that's obviously a little unfair. And there is no incentive for the bank who has got the customer onboarded to keep that data live, updated at all points in time. Easy mechanism could be, if you are contributing data, if that 100 rupees which the user is paying, split that into a revenue stream for that, and revenue stream not from a point of view of profit, but at least take care of the infrastructure cost of that entity who has onboarded the customer. Every DPI does not mean, a DPI does not mean it has to be free of cost for the user.
The institutional, or what we call legal entity KYCs, are still in a physical form, largely, if not invariably largely. I think that's a big thing. While the CKYC has been coming in the picture, but it has still not been able to give the central thing, which is what the mutual fund industry has been able to do through a KRA mechanism. I think that KRA mechanism, some single independent institutional owner can be the key, and then once it is done through that channel, then the rest of the things, anytime, every time when the customer has to look at it, should simply be kind of taken it from there, instead of being asking time and again from bank to bank, institute to institute. I think one structure which is more reliable, trustworthy, and for which the regulator bless that this is how it is, I think that's what the structure one should look at it. From the non-individual piece, I'm saying a little difficult thing which one has not understood, why PAN has been removed, which was a very single straightforward document for identity, at least for the non-individuals. I'm saying, well, for individual you have brought in a lot of stuff, but PAN was a very simple straightforward thing which was there, and I'm saying for whatever good reason it has been taken off. So I'm saying maybe a need to look at that, can that also be a part of the stuff. So
we've been given something which everyone is talking about today, whether it starts from regulator to businesses to individuals. Everyone is talking about what KYC does. So just to begin with, perhaps all of us have always been very comfortable with the retail KYC. We've seen how UIDA changed everything when in 2010 first Aadhaar was given out in Maharashtra. It changed the way we all looked at our identities, starting from an individual to all the citizens of this country across strata. People could use it for payments. Someone could use it for collecting DBT. Somebody like us could use it for, probably even today, getting it in DigiYatra, other identifications. So across the spectrum, retail KYC has done its job. But if you look at the parallel for it, what have businesses got today? Earlier we used to have Business PAN, we've got Udyam which has come out. However, the standardization, the way UIDA Aadhaar has been able to do, that still seems to be missing somewhere for all the businesses. There are a lot of conversations around why KYC is to be done. There's a lot of conversation and challenges around UBO. So we'd like to understand today in this panel with our dear panelists here that how, when we deep dive into this, that how these challenges are to be taken up, how the structure can look like, and what more can we do as an industry and perhaps with the regulator to ensure that these challenges are met and there's a successful structure out of it. So speaking about these challenges, I think, Alok, I'd like to start with you to understand that when we were discussing earlier, UBO is one of the bigger challenges which we all have seen in our seen and talked about. So is there something like that, or even much more than this, which you see in the industry, which you see businesses complaining about, or rather fidgeting with in terms when it comes to KYC?
So when it comes to KYC, actually, see, I've been in the banking for almost close to 30 years, and this is one issue which never seems to go away, actually. Okay, and I'm speaking more from a client perspective. I think this is one of the biggest, let's say, pain point for a business owner. Okay, when the entity goes to the bank for, let's say, current account opening or for lending. the challenge is, I mean, while let's say RBI has issued guidelines which seem to be, let's say, very standardized kind of a thing, but banks actually interpret it differently. Okay, different banks interpreted it differently, and within banks also, let me tell you, different people interpret it differently. They resolve it differently. They execute it differently. So it becomes an extremely, I mean, big pain point for the clients who are on the business side. And there's so much of, I mean, to and fro which happens. I mean, see, very frankly, I have not been able to understand as to why this cannot be resolved. Actually, I mean, this KYC to and fro keeps on going and going and on. So yes, I mean, this is the biggest pain point for a guy coming to take a let's say facility from the bank or current account opening. And okay, now let me come to the specific issue of this ultimate beneficial ownership. See, what happens is actually, see, more so these days, I mean, there's so many layers of, let's say, ownership which is there. I mean, you have a, let's say, holding company which is there, and then they've got some offshore companies holding majorities, or let's say some shares in that. So it becomes, I mean, a lot of layers which are there. I mean, very difficult to actually, even for banks also. I mean, see, I'll tell you from bank side, not just from a KYC perspective, even from a credit perspective, actually we have to find out as to who is the ultimate beneficial ownership. So it takes a lot of time actually. I mean, and ultimately it's the client who suffers. Okay. So I think the solution lies in, I mean, RBI has to come out with some solution, okay, as to what to do with this thing. Maybe some possible solution, of course, could be, let's say, they create something like, let's say, Aadhaar for the companies, I mean, for the business entity itself, or something actually. But this needs to be resolved, because it is actually never ending within the bank side. And it consumes so much of, let's say, resources, so much of bandwidth of everyone, so much of time, I mean, which is so crucial. So I think it's time to actually think about, I mean, RBI has to come out with some solution to this thing.
I think there'll be a lot of people who would also say that there are different entities who could come up with it. I think, Ashish, in your experience, I would say there are similar kind of challenges. Any more insight on what banks have been facing or what businesses have been facing?
I think, like Alok mentioned, that this is a age-old issue, while KYC has evolved over a period of time, etc. But still, is it very simple, very intuitive, standardized across for the entities? It is not. And largely, if you were to look at the entity side and divide it into partnerships and proprietorships, and then your private limited concerns and limited concerns, probably there are ways to solve it for private limited concerns and limited concerns because of MCA. At least, you know, even while you're opening a current account, etc., you require 2 entity proofs and so on and so forth. But largely on the partnership side, which is a large volume of Indian business, still remains unresolved. And simple pieces which need to be done is, A, can we define the data structures in terms of these are the documents, like for individuals there are 6 or 7 documents which can be accepted, then banks can decide which document under which circumstances to be taken, etc. So that's one piece. Similarly, there is no standardization there for businesses. Second important piece is the documents which are there for businesses. There's no digitization of those documents and not available to the institutions on a consent basis, so that the entire digital journeys can happen. And the third complexity which arises is that there's always an authorized signatory on behalf of the entity, and we really don't have a repository of sort which connects who's authorized to sign on behalf of this entity in a digital form. As a result, either all the partners have to sign, or you need a BR every time account modification has to be done and an account opening has to be done, whether on the liability side or on the asset side of the business. And each of these, even the format of the BR is not standardized, etc. And so all that makes this entire problem a lot more complex as compared to an individual piece. Not to say that it can't be solved. I think it's a question of starting that journey of beginning to solve it, and then chip it bit by bit till the time we have a holistic solution.
Absolutely. One of the things you touched upon was UBI and re-KYC, which is still a bit of a challenge. So any thoughts around that?
No, so having kind of heard both from Alok and him, so that issue, Ashish, both that issue stands, you know, in terms of first and foremost issue is the institutional, or what we call legal entity KYCs are still in a physical form, largely, if not invariably largely. I think that's a big thing. As you started, I think the entire shift in individual happened with the Aadhaar coming in place and the DigiLocker, etc. coming in place. It's eased out the process. Plus, you have a lot of e-KYCs and OTP and all of the options which are there in the individual category, which is what is the exact challenge, or rather the challenge to be addressed for the non-individual or the business entities. Having one of the way, I'm just thinking aloud in terms of the UBO part of it is a problem. Can it not be considered, I'm saying at least from a prospective point of view, while the registrations happens, those things should be taken up there itself, and from then it happens. I'm saying the whatever is there, but at least forthgoing problem you can address it, get that declarations or confirmations instead of deep diving into the entire structures and the layers and stuff like that. And the ROC one says the authentic thing, you can just quickly pick it across from that line. So those lines of solutions have to be looked at from the individual perspective. And the whole point is, while the CKYC has been coming in the picture, but it has still not been able to give the central thing, which is what the mutual fund industry has been able to do through a KRA mechanism. I think that KRA mechanism, some single independent institutional owner can be the key, and then once it is done through that channel, then the rest of the things, anytime, every time when the customer has to look at it, should simply be kind of taken it from there, instead of being asking time and again from bank to bank, institute to institute. I think one structure which is more reliable, trustworthy, and for which the regulator bless that this is how it is. I think that's what the structure one should look at it.
Absolutely. And I think in that, if we also look at how this structure should be, so the pertinent question, probably picking from what Alok said, that should it be created by a regulator? Should it be created by a consortium? Should it be created by a private players? Because there are risks around it. If there is an entity which is from a segment wherein there is a leeway given to compliance, then we see that the risks are on the higher side. But if the risk is managed, then you would not see there is a huge entry barrier for organizations to step in. What do you think? Should the structure be, or probably who should start this with to go forward?
See, I think given the nature of the problem, irrespective of the fact who creates the platform, it certainly needs to have blessings of the regulator. And my sense is it's not only the regulator, but entire finance ministry, etc., and directly the central government. So they need to certainly have blessings, etc. And then the next question is, who does it? It could be a separate any entity. Like today, you have from an entity perspective, you have an MCA already there for private limited concerns and limited concerns. Can we augment that data, like you mentioned in terms of Hemant mentioned in terms of at the time of registration, do we take the UBO details, etc., capture that, provide a mechanism where it in case it needs to be edited, etc., with necessary proofs, it is simple, easy to go and adopt that. That's one side which gets taken care of. Then the second component which needs to be solved for is the partnership pieces. So do we get all partnerships to get registered? So look at simply in the Maharashtra piece, where if you have to register your rent agreement today, everything happens digitized. There's a standard rent agreement which comes in with maybe a couple of clauses which you can change. So can we have a simple mechanism like that, where all the partnerships get registered there? So with that done, that will take care of your legal entity proofs, etc. And then once you have this data, all your other certifications, right, whether it's a professional tax, whether it is shops and establishment tax, everything should feed on from this data itself. Then it becomes far more universal. And the third piece which will need to be created is that linkage between authorized signatories and the entities. That, to my mind, can still be done by a private entity, as long as it is not for profit. It has a larger trust of the larger community of banks, whether in the consortium mode or otherwise. But and each one of them is a significant play which needs to be done. So maybe no single entity can do it, but you need to put these things in place under the Ministry of Finance and RBI.
Absolutely.
Maybe having a regulated entity itself do this thing. What Ashish has suggested. Say, like we already have bureaus who are, let's say, collecting information about the let's say track record of the buyer, borrowers. We have rating agencies again who are regulated. So why not having, it is a very critical area. I mean, it is no less critical area. So maybe we can have a regulated agency doing it, multiple regulated entities doing this thing.
Absolutely.
Under strict regulations, yes.
So Hemant, any thoughts on that, how
Yeah.
the structure should look like?
Yeah, so the structure, I think the CKYC, the way it has been structured and created, I think somewhere the industry understanding is was in the line of what to create it across, what is for the mutual fund industry and across on that. So CKYC is already there, which is well within the direct supervision of central or the finance ministry and all. So why can't they create, or I'm saying in a way, one or two, whatever that agencies or the formats or the body which they can create, and then you can rely on them and they govern the entire structure and the aspects. So there is no individual, multiple banks, people within the banks who are driving it. It is the structure which drives it. And once they put it across in a given format, with the given consent and the flow, then everything is coming there. And the whole point is today, the regulator also need to look at it. While the CKYC is there, it has been still left to the banks, and it has not been said that you rely on what has been created by somebody else. It has been left saying that you look at it, but still the responsibility is with you as an entity. So no bank is taking a chance, and without knowing who is the previous entity who has created that CKYC, it's not possible to rely on saying that what would have happened, because regulator will come and ask you, what is that you have seen it and how have you not correct. I think that the entire trust part has to be bringing across on that line. And from the non-individual piece, I'm saying a little difficult thing which one has not understood why PAN has been removed, which was a very single straightforward document for identity, at least for the non-individuals. I'm saying, well, for individual you have brought in a lot of stuff, but PAN was a very simple straightforward thing which was there, and I'm saying for whatever good reason it has been taken off. So I'm saying maybe a need to look at that, can that also be a part of the stuff. So there are a lot of ways to simplify that, but the entity centralized and trusted. I think that's something very, very essential. And who should create it? Let the regulator or let the government do it for the first, so that everyone has a proper confidence reposed on that. If not, yes, the other options which are regulated entities, if not government bodies, that also is good. But some solid, strong central structure is what should be looked at.
Absolutely. And picking from the same that who could create it, from that it also comes to the fact that how the solution would look like to this. So what probably for the benefit of audience, we've been discussing about the global cases which are there, like SyncPass is there. It's a QR code based solution for businesses. So what probably get to understand from you is that how do you think these solutions could actually be created? It cannot be completely digital. It cannot be completely in the paper-based format sometimes we have today at the block, at the district and city level we go to. So what do you think these solutions could look like, if we could get some envision from you in this case?
See, I think the GST is the grand success, okay, and that's what it can be looked at it across, because it has got both your PAN as the inherent number, as well as the structure which you've created. So if you take a look at that, and more things as we see every quarter, every month, things are just simply improving across on that line as reported. So that can be the case, and that can be looked at. So I'm saying maybe what more learnings can be taken up, exactly the modus operandi through which the neighboring country would have done. But that is the single largest thing. So I'm saying that's your industry Aadhaar, if I can say so. When you have an individual Aadhaar, can we make GST as the industry Aadhaar? And if that makes the sense, because everything has to be reported there, and that can fetch and fill a lot of things which the otherwise, the non-individual customers would have to do and around. So I think that's something which centrally should be looked at. It's something called industry Aadhaar.
Alok, you think this kind of structure can function, or this kind of solution can function, specifically from your domain expertise? Do you think that this is?
Yeah, I think this looks workable for me. Another area I just wanted to actually bring about is this corporates face a lot of issues in re-KYC. Okay, at the time when there's a change in the authorized signatories. Okay, and of course, I mean it changes. I mean not very frequently, but it does change. So what happens is, banks typically actually, if the re-KYC has not been done, they stop the operations, which actually again creates a lot of non-productive let's say, issues, right? So that I feel, I think my suggestion to the regulators would be that if we can fix up some kind of a let's say time period, okay, before which, I mean, no KYC will be required, even if there is a change in the authorized signature. Because I believe, I mean, see, ultimately a signatory, I mean, does not do, I mean, anything which is not, let's say, authorized, any which ways, okay. So I don't think there's much risk, even if they allow, let's say, a non-KYC guy to continue, let's say, signing the checks or whatever, actually.
Understood. Ashish, you're doing a lot of work around this, so I think then I need to pick your brains as to how would you propose that, specifically in light of what IBCI is doing, that we take this forward?
See, I think there's a fundamental difference approach between what the regulator took for CKYC versus Aadhaar. In CKYC, each bank was supposed to upload their data and then create a unique number, etc. Now, bank is a consumer of data. In Aadhaar, there was a centralized authority, UIDAI, which created data, and the onus of updating was on the individual customers, right? And then everybody else in the ecosystem became users of that data, and obviously there were multiple authentications, etc., which happened when the data was onboarded onto the system, right? And that, to my mind, is a critical component. Like I mentioned, that RBI just says that board approved KYC norm, hence each bank will have their own KYC norm, which means if banks were contributing data to CKYC, each one would contribute as per their understanding, which may not be applicable to the other bank. Hence, the important piece would be to create a centralized repository of sorts. GSTN could have been an answer, but unfortunately, if you were to look at it, out of 6.5 crore, 7 crore MSMEs which exist, only about 1.5 crores are registered on GSTN. Hence, GSTN number may not solve the problem. It could be PAN, which could be easily used because that's a much larger penetration, etc. So, but the responsibility has to be on the individual firms, etc., that you have to go and register. Also, there are multiple unique identifiers today. There's an LEI, there's Udyam Aadhaar. All those have to then feed in from the central data which gets created. And not all 6.5, 7 crore customers are going to come on board. They can say above 50 crores in next 6 months, 12 months, then keep going down basis their turnover, etc. And simultaneously keep making it imperative for the banks to pull data from this centralized data sources, so that usage is one side. And I'm using a term banks because of the BFSI piece, but it could be anything where as an entity they need to give their identity documents or authorized signatory documents. So my sense is that's the way it will need to lead to. And the other important piece would be that the same system should be, just like we have an OTP based consent in Aadhaar and multiple other ways. The data can be shared only with the consent of the authorized signatories, right? And the entity should take the responsibility that if they have updated the authorized signatories in this portal for specific purposes, etc., as long as they there's log to prove that they have given the consent, it will be tenable in the court of law, right? So that's an important piece which will need to come in. In terms of the architecture, which is scalable, immutable, etc., there are enough and more tech solutions which can be found, but the entire piece is to set the overall framework in place, and this is going to take time, right? If we end up doing it, and given the way we are going as a nation, the number of MSMEs and entities is only going to increase. Absolutely. Right? It's sooner than later that we should start on this.
Yeah, sure. So one more thing which probably quite a few researchers on this aspect have put in, that once a centralized repository comes in place or a solution comes in place, the cost of every KYC should be brought down, because once done and the onus is taken up by the issuing entity, then the cost entirely across the board should be coming down. However, there is again a contrary thought process as well to say that a cost invested by one entity shall be borne across. So perhaps that is also one of the factors which businesses and specifically the repository agencies who are working into this have been contemplating with. So Ashish, maybe I'll start with you. Any thoughts around that which
See, let's look at it into two folds. One is the Aadhaar example. Okay, even before I go to that, any entity who's using this KYC services, what is the option today they have? They have to go in the physical world. They obviously end up spending money there. So that money for the benefits to flow to the ecosystem, if today they are for an onboarding a customer, they're spending 1,000 rupees. If digitally it comes down to 100 rupees, I don't think any of the entities will mind spending 100 rupees for as a replacement for the $1,000 which they do that. And in that the system can be set up, etc. Second, if the independent centralized authority is creating it and everybody else is doing it. The other piece would be the example which you were talking about. Maybe what comes to mind is like account aggregator ecosystem. There's a particular bank who has invested in, or for the CKYC example, there's a particular bank who has onboarded the customer. They have spent 1,000 rupees, etc. Now all other banks in the ecosystem who are dipping into this are getting it at 100 rupees in my example. Now that's obviously a little unfair. And there is no incentive for the bank who has got the customer onboarded to keep that data live, updated at all points in time. An easy mechanism could be, if you are contributing data, if the 100 rupees which the user is paying, split that into a revenue stream for that. And revenue stream not from a point of view of profit, but at least take care of the infrastructure cost of that entity who has onboarded the customer, right? Those are commercial models, my sense is, which can still be found solutions to, as long as we are okay to say that every DPI does not mean, a DPI does not mean it has to be free of cost for the user.
Absolutely.
Right. I think a bank will be willing to more than willing to actually pay for it. Actually, see, the direct cost is one thing. The indirect cost that banks are spending today on KYC solutions is probably more than the direct cost. So bank would be absolutely more than willing to bear the cost.
See, I think the problem of re-KYC, which is in addition to the primary KYC, which is what we spoke about, I think, and that is true even for the more of a risk categorization, which is a high risk customers, and the duration is just about 2 years. I think 2 years things doesn't significantly change, but the kind of efforts the entities are making and the customers are suffering, okay, to get that things done is very high. I think that is something which should be looked at. Can that 2 years be, a little more? I'm saying once it is at 5 years and not 2 years kind of a timeline. So just a solution point of view. Second, from the structure point of view also, once a centralized, reliable structure gets created, I think cost is something everybody would get sink into it. Yeah. See, the actual problem for the bankers is that what sort of an effort, you can't outsource these activities because it is customer related, right? So you have to put, how do you reach out to customers? The moment you link them, on the other side, we have been saying that please watch the link carefully, don't open it otherwise. Where is a sense of reliability they get it that this is coming from an entity which is genuine and not otherwise. I'm saying that's the whole stuff. Second, they are not aware, and then the bankers or the staff who goes there gets straightway out of the door saying that how many times do you need it, and we have given it, because they don't know or they really don't understand that it is to be given again. So for them it looks like that the banks are inefficient and then they are asking it. So getting the awareness is something very, very critical for them to know that this is something regulatory protocol and we are supposed to do it. I think each bank honestly would be, in a percentage hovering, which is not more than 50-60%, and that too also after spending so much of a time and energy and getting regulatory reprimanded every time saying that you are not where you should be.
Absolutely. So apart from cost and awareness, would you think that cost, we already agree that is a model possible, awareness is a challenge. Do you think any other infrastructural challenges we might face in terms of execution if we go forward with this?
See, I think it's not an infrastructure challenge per se, but it'll take time. Adoption of this will take time. Look at it, maybe in last 5 years, all of us have taken Aadhaar as a gospel truth and saying that it's convenient, easy. It started in 2008. So it took that much time. It's just that an important piece would be to not lose, if we start this journey, just stay on course. It will take time, and don't lose patience and then start creating another set of numbers or another set of processes. That's an important piece. Also, it needs to be well thought through, because CKYC has shown us that RBI really pushed all banks saying that contribute, and it's been at least 6-7 years, and we haven't seen real value there. So whatever we design, and we might encounter some challenges, etc. But I'm sure everything can be solved for. Just stay the course and start moving, get going. That's most important because it's a large problem to be solved for us.
A regulatory push definitely helps at a lot of places.
I would agree with you, Ashish, and you must have seen in the bureaus also. Even after spending so much of years in bureaus, I mean, we still don't have reached, let's say, what, 80-90% accuracy. I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
Civil is the highest, but other bureaus are still at the lower.
Everything takes time.
It takes time, actually. Yeah.
Just stay the course.
So one has to start, actually.
I think in the entire effort of the government in terms of ease of doing business and the rank which is coming up, I think this should be finding as a top of the notch item. Absolutely. That the ease of doing business in all different ways, etc. I'm saying these certificates, the way are required for those things. So saying different municipal corporations, towns or states will have different formats and all of that. So I think it is a very different flavor and experience customer has it across on that line. So I think that's where it has to be. So be it saying that recognized as a customer for the bank, what requirement is, it has to be at the top of the notch item in terms of anything which you need to do on the ease of the business.
Absolutely. Yeah. Standardization is probably the answer. So I think the key takeaway from all our panelists is at least let's start somewhere. And then let the regulator give a lot of push, let the industry also come together, let the collaboration happen amongst entities to be able to take this forward. And it looks like that this is the need of the hour to take it for businesses, for an entity to come in between, perhaps a consortium of entities to come in between and take the mantle forward for all of us and make businesses' life easy.
Even if the e-sign is done, it is through some director is doing it on dongle, which is eventually most of the directors are not carrying. Right. So why Aadhaar e-sign is not acceptable on a board resolution today? So some basic fundamental questions, maybe somebody has to take it up. Why MCA is not passing that information to banks while onboarding? There's no API available, right? So some parts of it, probably, yes, that's a discussion which has to go a long way. But my sense is that's a first step, it has to be done. If we have to go somewhat digital and maybe some other out-of-the-box ideas to make business KYC more simpler.
I think perfectly valid piece that it has to start. And MCA, my sense is not only making the APIs available, making it mandatory for companies to update their directors' information with a shorter duration as compared to the current time lag they have. Because as a banker, you'll hate it if you have to depend on the MCA data, even if they were to provide the APIs today.
Even right. UBO information is not provided to
Absolutely.
banks. Yeah.
That's the point I'm saying. So it really needs to be made, as I said initially, as a part of the registration process. And any change which you do, which you are referring to the centralized registration authorities, make it as a part of it and let that become a reliable document for the users to pick it up from here. Absolutely. So the whole point is that the complete shift, what it requires is, rather than making the users or the customers to become a provider, there has to be a centralized provider, and that is what the rest of them become the users. So that's the significant shift which has to happen, and the sense is again same Aadhaar, right? So it's once it is created, and but there can be small lacunas here and around, but I think ultimately the structure needs to be in that way so that the business KYC, I think it's something which is to be taken up as a key thing, and as I was trying to tell it, for ease of doing business, I think something very, very critical. And way forward definitely has to be like that.
Thank you.
Just one more point to add, Amit, in terms of the authorized signatory bit, there's some movement which has started happening. IBDIC, which is a consortium of 18 banks, we've picked it up with the RBI departments, etc. And we are working on designing that piece. It will take time for us to put it together, etc. But there's some work, at least on the authorized signatory bit, which has started happening. And the important piece is also, and I keep thinking only from a BFSI perspective, but once that gets created, it will have much larger piece. There is some rewiring of the bank system also, which will be required, because the way authorized signatory information is stored in a bank is non-standardized. Even in the same bank, depending on which channel the customer is coming in, the data structures look very, very different.
Absolutely.
Right. But some work has started on that.
Thanks.
Thank you, Amit.
Just curious to understand how do we compare in terms of the other geographies actually of the economies of similar size, similar demographics, or for that matter. I mean, is it as complex for them as well? Because we don't get to see and hear much about that. If you could throw some light on that.
No, I think maybe there is no quick comparable stuff to be shared in terms of saying that the larger stuff across on the large geographies or the kind of a population and complexities. I think there is nothing immediately available. I heard it across the ease of business and all. What the government tried to do more is, based on the Australian comparison. I think that's what more was heard when these things, and that CKYC eminent also is out of the government interactions and the learning with the Australian government. I think that's what it was there. And the ease of doing business, as I said, there are a lot of parameters, but could be one of these to operating this thing. So there are certain things, if you see UBO's kind of identifications, it was a kind of a knee-jerk reaction to some instances which most of us or all of us would know has happened in past and make them risk. I'm just trying to understand having created UBOs, how much of a benefit really the entire ecosystem has got it out of it. So can you look at it? Yes, at that time it was required. Can you refine it? Can you make it more, saying companies, live it and make it across, make it more which are unregistered entities and all of that. So what you're left with is largely, as Ashish said, is a partnership structure, which in our kind of a environment is far larger, higher. Moment you try to do something across on that line, like GST and registration, those partnership firms are also doing, right? They may not be registering the partnership firm, but cannot that be used it across, and that made as a base while making mandatory for them to register, because their thoughts are on a different line, saying that if I register the partnership, there can be other repercussions and stuff like that. So not a very concrete, clear answer to that across, but I think we have to evolve for ourselves and to come to the level saying that what really we need to do it. Typically like an individual identifier, a business identifier kind of a stuff is the key. And the central registration authorities or central data providing authority would be the answer as we move ahead.
Probably what just to add to what Ashish is saying and probably get a little more closure onto the question, you might want to look at what Saudi Arabia has done with their businesses to give one identifier, the way we have GST, and give one identifier to every business, and then perhaps that business has a recurring check with their board of directors, etc., so that address, board of directors, beneficiaries, all that is done. But that's done generally by the government. The second example is what probably we can look at is what Singapore has it in terms of SingPass. SingPass is the unique identifier, QR code-based digital tokenized KYC, which can be shared across businesses. So I want to pay to my supplier, I can utilize that and pay it. So it's used in trade as well. But with India being this massive scale and size, if we create something like that, that's going to be first of its kind. And I'm hoping that someone from this room will definitely be able to create it along with regulator.